Okay, now we will have a short moderated chat. I will try my best to somehow merge the two topics that are, I think, very different. Rama showed us a very an approach to sustainable design, which in different social situations, which is very, I would say. Not to say that your wasn't friendly, Asia, but it was very, calm and friendly. And as I know Asia from her, also her work before, as her brand is called Radical, we shouldn't expect anything less than little radical presentation, which was very interesting. And I have to say it was difficult to focus with all that noise. And it gave me this idea of how much like say digital pollution is produced all the time. So I think that was probably the idea behind the the sound that you presented. I would like to ask you first about your personal approach and how is it that that you choose the path that you choose to communicate the ideas that you do with your work, because maybe it will be a good starting point to further conversation about the ideas. First, I would like to know your background and why do you think that the way, what is the way to raise awareness among people about the topics that you bring?
That's a good question. So I choose the topic of digital ecology because I just see because we're living in a very interesting times and the digitalization happening everywhere and it's actually accelerated because of the corona, but we do not think about the consequences that it brought to the environment. We do not think about digital carbon footprint. We do not think about the amount of energy that the data centers consume and the amount of heat that it generates into the atmosphere. And considering the scale of that, I'm just really afraid if we would not raise awareness right now, it might be very problematic in a few years. And because also e-waste issue I mentioned during the presentation is also a huge problem. We do not talk about it. We rather prefer, to buy a new phone and to buy a new laptop rather than take care of the waste that we left behind. And the problem is huge. And I think it's really important to raise awareness. Because it's
especially since the topic that you talk about for some time now, I first heard about it from you, and honestly, as I've heard it somewhere around 1 year ago or so, I never heard anyone else talking about it. So it seems like it's such an extreme, the digital carbon footprint is such a big thing when you talk about it, and then suddenly you are the only person that I know that talks about it. Which what do you think is the reason for that? Why it's not the topic like with in general ecology that we talk about so much? Why the digital one isn't a topic? What do you think?
Comfortable with technology. We feel comfortable that we have an Instagram. We feel comfortable that we can post everything online, and we feel comfortable that we can have a new phone and take picture that with a higher resolution. But I think it's it's a hard step to at some point stay and say, okay, I got enough. I do not need it. And say it loud, like most of the social media are highly addictive, and to resign it, do not be a part of it. So it's really hard, and also it's hard because there is no alternative on the market right now, especially for most of the social channels like Instagram, Facebook, and other stuff. So it's really hard.
Yeah, I would like to talk about this, the alternatives, a little, maybe later on. But now I would like to hear from Rama. What is your position on that?
Sure. So what I loved about your presentation, Joanna, was it brings to light something that's obvious when you hear it, but may not be obvious before hearing it. And what I think with inclusive design is it's obvious when you hear it, but it's not obvious before that. We exclude a lot of people by design. We exclude a lot of people in our creative thought processes. People by age, ability, by gender, by geography, you know, the global north, the global south, east and west. Oslo is a small city, 500,000 people. If you live in the east of Oslo, you have a 10-year life expectancy reduction than if you live, you know, in the west. And this has become increasingly important. You know, if you think of the events that have been kicked off by the death of George Floyd, you know, where a man is just sort of has the life squeezed from him like a tube of toothpaste. Issues of racism come to light, and issues of ableism, of genderism, of ageism are all being called out. And we have so much work to do because, you know, there's one gorgeous little planet that we're on, and the same sun rises and sets on us all every day. But that day can be a radically different experience because of the exclusion that exists in the digital world, the physical world, that exists around us, and in that most dangerous place of all, which is the minds and hearts of people. So, you know, finally, we as designers, as creatives, as corporates, as, you know, as a nation, as nations, we have a role and responsibility to be promoting empathy, compassion, and kindness rather than power. And that's why I read out that poem. So that poem was a driving force for me when I was 14 to, you know, what I wanted to do was actually serve humanity. And I saw design as a vehicle of doing that, but I didn't know how because inclusive design didn't exist then. And these human-centered approaches were very much fringe. So it was very much a personal drive from when I was a teenager.
Yeah, and you talked about the race of issues that were actually issues before the pandemic, and now as the pandemic kind of acts like a catalyst of those issues and they become more and more visible. I would like to ask you, what do you think are the biggest problems facing from your perspective? Because Joanna talked about the digital footprint, which obviously pandemic must have made it much worse. And you said about the alternatives, which can be very difficult in the times where we are left with technology to connect to each other, right? So Asia, maybe first I would like to ask you, what are the alternatives? What alternatives do you see to reduce the impact that we have? As you said, it's very difficult because we don't have any alternatives. As with consumerism, we have some kind of alternative for more sustainable clothes or buying less. And what would you say would be alternative for a digital ecology?
For first of all, use less internet. I know it might sound trivial, but it's a really good advice to sometimes, you know, disconnect yourself and clean up the mess and clean up the data that you left behind, because most of the emails and other old posts and comments and everything is stored on the data centers, and this consumes energy. Clean your mailbox, clean all your old posts on your social media, and there are a lot of alternatives, like for example Ecosia. But it turns out when you dive deeper that the main engine is based on Bing, which is like, you know, associated with the Microsoft. So there's like, you know, you still don't feel like there is something that is actually really like sustainable in the core. So it's very hard, to be honest. So that's why I'm also trying to build myself some kind of alternatives, but it's also really hard. So yeah, it's a struggle. So just what I can recommend, just talk more to each other and disconnect yourself for a while, because it's also good for the for mental health, but also it would be good to somehow pressure the big tech corpo on on some kind of regulation or anything that could somehow regulate that, because most of the data we produce, which is like gather about our behavior online, so yeah, so we are not the source of the problem, but like the greedy people who are trying to find out more and more about us are. So
yeah, especially since, as you said, we are not in control, and we might feel a little powerless because of that, but maybe starting with our own computers and our own choices is the way.
There are some small, like small actions you can do, like for example, when you're close to your Wi-Fi network, try to use your Wi-Fi on a phone, because consume less energy than than the mobile network. Try to put your phone in a dark mode, because then it's also consume less energy, because the pixels on the screen does not require like to be like that, the same as you have a phone with the white screen. So yeah, there are some and clean up the mess. I think that's the biggest problem, that we left behind a lot of mess, and just try to clean it. Clean it for you.
Slow down and clean the mess. And Rama, what is the issue that is most important for you, especially in today's situation?
So I just wanted to say I support what Joanna said about, digital junk is a massive negative component of our lives. And we've actually done some inclusive design projects around that. How do you stop people turning into data neurotics or being constantly connected? And I think, the idea of cold zoning yourself digitally is absolutely sacrosanct for human health. The big issue from a kind of socially sustainable perspective is that we won't learn. Will we learn? So, and about 7 years ago, I actually got very upset. I was in the shower where I do a lot of thinking. And I was, or at least a lot of ideas kind of come at me quite quick fire. And one of the things I was upset about, I'd had a hard week where we had looked at gender imbalance in, Latin America. We looked at the kind of overuse of technology. But the particularly upsetting thing was one of our researchers was in a care home where he'd seen this older woman being shouted at, and her crime was clearing away the plates of the table she was having lunch at for the other people. And when we interviewed the staff, they said it's health and safety. But she was almost in tears. We were in tears. And I got thinking, in the projects that we've done, there's so many social issues. How do we address them all? There's one little body, little mind here. How do we address them all? And the answer came that it's leadership. We need to address leadership. And leadership is not just leading other people, it's leading yourself. So you need to start with a sense of self. So if I was to sum it up in 2 words, it's be conscious. So do anything you want, but be conscious about it, because your consciousness will actually tell you whether it's wasting energy, hurting other people. We have this term of making a killing, which I hate. But if you're making a killing, which means you succeed in terms of profit, someone is making a dying. So that is, the social sustainability, the economic and the environmental need to go hand in hand. So that would be my answer. Be conscious, address leadership.
Yeah. Joining your two, what you two said, I think that I would recommend everyone to look at, if already hasn't done that, to watch Social Dilemma and the movie on Netflix, which for me made a big change because it really shows how we should slow down and be more conscious, as you, Rama, said, about our choices in digital as well. So just to, we don't have much time. I just wanted to ask you the question that we want to answer from all our speakers today. We wanted to ask you what advice, what if it was one advice, would it be if you could give regarding sustainable city design? So talking about city design, what would be one advice that you could give?
So I have a one sentence thing is, don't just make a city isn't just sustainable because it's livable. It's sustainable because it's lovable. So from livable to lovable, that would be my advice.
Asa?
So I'm going to stick with the topic of digital ecology because as you know, the amount of data is growing on an alarming scale. The data centers will become integral part of the cities. So we as citizens who actually produce this data that need to be stored, please be conscious in terms of, producing it and try to do it less. So we will not have to have the data centers, which consume crazy amount of energy, Christ, believe me. And it's a huge problem. And we do not want to have it as a part of our cities, because cities is for the citizens.
Yeah, and if you could give some more information for our attendees, if they want to, know more about the topics that you talked about, where would you send them? Your website?
I can recommend you to follow me on Instagram. Fighting with myself.
How ironic!
No, believe me. I have been fighting so much with myself to find the something that could be also benefit, and I also could connect with you. But it turns out the Instagram and the Facebook is an only source. Believe me, I was even trying to build my own independent internet network. So, but it turns out it's a lot of work. There is a really cool project in Berlin. It's called Freifunk, and you can build your own website, own network. But it's it's too much work. And so please just follow me on the Instagram, and there you have a link tree, and there is a source of the information with a huge file with a lot of research and a lot of links and everything. Just
okay, thank you. And Rama, where would you send our attendees for more information on the topics that you talked about?
Sure. So two areas again, LinkedIn and Instagram for me. You can see my name on screen. It's pretty unique because it was misspelled by the British when we landed in South America. And also Linktree/HHCD, standing for the Helen Hamlyn Center for Design. We have on there many links, many free resources for you guys. And we're also setting up something called Creative Leaders Circle. So rather like yourself, Joanna, we are setting up our own network to do this. And we want about 300 people from 85 countries to join us for an event on the 18th of November. So the Linktree/HHCD, you'll see a link to that there. If not, ping me on LinkedIn or Instagram.
Thank you so much, both of you, Joanna, Joanna, Asia, and Rama. Thank you so much.